Sports Show with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi. So it's 94.5 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. Really fascinating guests we have on the show. We interview sports people at the very highest level, local athletes, sports people, footballers, sports people from around the world as well, and people who work in the field across a broad range of disciplines. We've had our latest feature, which is not so the latest feature now. We've had it for a while now. We've interviewed some of the world's most influential psychologists and people who work in a variety of fields who've brought us some really fascinating insights. And we're going to bring you today something slightly different. Musician, everyone knows my passion for music and the passion for music in Salford. It's a great area for music and a lot of passion for music in the area and particularly in the north of England, a lot of passion. And in the UK, you could say, is known around the world for producing music. A really fascinating guest today who's going to speak about music, gives a really interesting insight into the world of music. She's received many accolades for singing and songwriting, and it's really interesting stuff. I've listened to her tunes. They're fantastic. I'm sure you'll enjoy her music too. If you can play us a tune for us as well. So Jim O'Reilly, great to have you on board the show. Welcome to the show.
Hi Jim, how are you doing?
Yeah, no, all good. Really interesting to have you on board the show. So let's start from the beginning for our listeners, Jim. What got you into music? What was sort of your motivation?
I started singing really young, about the age of 6, because I was spotted in a school play, and so I started music lessons in primary school and kind of took it from there, where I started learning guitar. But the thing that really pushed me to write and develop my music was my Irish heritage and sort of the influence of going to Ireland as a child, and the fact that, you know, you could go in a little local place and everyone would be writing songs, everyone would be singing about, you know, stories that they built over the years, and I think that was a massive influence for me, and ever since really I've been storytelling through my music.
Yeah, that's really, you know, fascinating. Certainly my experiences of going to Ireland, that's one thing for sure. It's just fantastic, and, you know, it's really fascinating, and obviously steeped in music tradition as well, and it really is amazing. And in terms of yourself, how long have you been sort of writing and you know, performing yourself, or writing in general, Jim? How long has it been for you now?
Well, I'm 25 and I've been writing since I was 13, so yeah, it's longer than I even remembered actually. Writing for a very long time, and I think the perspective that you have on life obviously changes so much to your experiences and as you grow older, and I think your writing only gets better because you have such a wider view on the world, really.
Absolutely. And in terms of yourself, your own performances, what would you say are some of your sort of, you know, biggest performances that you've managed to do thus far?
I've had some really amazing ones. I've had major academies and Apollos across Manchester, because that's where I'm from. So, you know, performing and supporting bands such as sort of artists that I've been involved with over the years, that are Manchester bands that I've supported. Then I've done things like when I got signed to a label in Ireland, I've sang with Glee stars from the old American sort of sitcom. I've performed in UK Parliament. So many, it's hard to remember sometimes, but there's just been such a variety of different shows that I've been involved in that have truly been just incredible.
Well, it must be really amazing. And what's it like, just for our listeners, to sort of perform? I mean, there's some you know, pretty big bands you've mentioned there that have gone on to do really well. What's it like to sort of perform alongside bands like that, Jim? Just a bit of an insight into what the experience is like.
Well, one of the ones that I would call upon is Catfish and the Bottlemen. And Catfish and the Bottlemen started out sort of doing academies similar to me, and I think I didn't realise, you know, how important the academy side of thing was with being a writer. And I think that's what I got from it. I started to understand how, like, those really grassroots venues build you as an artist, and to perform alongside people like Cole Page. He's a very well-known name in Manchester.
Yeah.
And Jason Manford has been on some of the gigs that I've been on, and various things like that. It's amazing because it spurs you on to want to do more, to meet more of those sorts of people that you can just learn about the industry from, really.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating stuff, and that's really great experience, and I can imagine it is a learning experience, and sort of to be around that environment we can all learn. Obviously, lockdown has had a big impact on many of us, on all of us, and it's not been easy. And with yourself, your own experience, I believe you wrote an album during lockdown. Tell us a bit about what you did sort of during lockdown. Obviously, at the time of this recording, we're on pre-record. Things have sort of changed in lockdown, and they may continue to change again. But generally speaking, in the period of lockdown, what did you do in terms of writing an album yourself?
So, I mean, I think for everyone, lockdown was a massive reflection on, where your life had gone so far, what you'd experienced so far. And for me, lockdown was just post, to be completely honest, a breakup. And I was actually told to shield in lockdown as well because I have a heart condition. So I had so much time to, actually take in what was happening in the world, to understand myself a little bit more. And I wrote my first album, really. I mean, I've done so many EPs. I've done quite a lot of small sections of original material that I've released. But in lockdown, I just, it was almost like I couldn't put the book down.
Yeah. Because
there was so much to say. There was so much about my own personal experiences to talk about and try and contemplate and actually, in a cathartic way, deal with. But then also looking at the world and looking at what was happening to everyone's families, and just actually reflecting on that as a person watching. There's so much art that will come out of this. It is a time of reflection, it is a time of creativity, and I think I've really recognised that and want to make the best of it, even now going forward, because things are still very uncertain.
Absolutely. And what was the experience like writing the album in that period? I mean, how would you describe the experience itself? You mentioned that was sort of quite cathartic to do so, but generally speaking, how would you sort of describe the experience of sort of writing an album under those circumstances? Were you influenced by what was going on in the world, or did you sort of just switch off from it all and focus purely on the album? And how did it work for you, Jem?
No, I think it's definitely sort of reflective on looking at other people's situations in the world, because I think often as artists we're quite introvert without meaning to be all the time, and we do obviously feel more for what we've been through. But I think the main thing, in a world pandemic, what you realise is everyone plays a part and everyone has a struggle in some form with every scenario that goes on. So I think it really opened me up to talk about nurses in my songs, talk about the healthcare system, worry about the world and where it's going and where the economy's going. And but then also equally part of the album is about my own personal reflection on growing up and going through a breakup, and then also sort of looking at family members and the way that they had to deal with the pandemic, such as younger family members that are children, that, looking at it through their eyes, trying to imagine what it's like for them. I think it's just made me more diverse as a writer more than anything.
That's really powerful stuff. It's really fascinating insight into that, and I think that in terms of music, one of the things about music, in the days where we used to go to concerts and you listen to a tune and that tune means different things for different people. In terms of yourself, what do you hope your music brings to people?
I hope my music brings people confidence. I try to write in a way that almost reflects on maybe losing your fire. This album is called Fire. That's the best way I can describe it. And it's all about going through something like we all have in the last year, and feeling like you've lost your spark, you've lost what makes you an individual. And I really hope that through me, trying to regain my own fire, that I give people that motivation within the songs, and that people have a way of relating to them and, think, well, I've been through something like that. She's got a point there. Maybe I do need to have more confidence in myself,
Mm-hmm.
And I just want it to make people smile. I write to entertain as well, and you want to make people happy with your music. But most importantly, the main message in this album is to never, whilst life throws so many hard things at us, never let it stamp out your fire.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting stuff, powerful stuff. And, speaking of like performing, and one thing I have missed is watching live bands. I watch a lot of live bands, but obviously it's really important that, I can, fully appreciate, obviously, the sort of the regulations and sort of abiding by them, and I can understand the devastating effects of what's happening. But from a music point of view, in terms of performing, what would you say for you love most about performing music? What do you enjoy most, Jem, in performing your sort of music?
I love that people get something out of it. People feel inspired. Well, I hope they do. I love that you can really recall a memory in someone's brain, even if it's a cover song or something, where it reminds them of a special time in their life, and you're singing that in front of them, and they're sharing that moment with you. I think music is about moments, and sharing moments with strangers. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But it's incredible to actually open someone up to enjoy something that you're performing in a very personal way, and they're relating to. It's one of the most incredible experiences that I've ever had, and I don't think anything quite adds up to having someone truly appreciate your entertainment.
No, absolutely. And sort of for yourself, does that give you a buzz, Jem, knowing that there's people out there listening to your music and they make their own meaning and they really enjoy it? Does that sort of how does that feel to know that even for like a short while people can lose themselves in a tune and just escape sort of reality, so to speak, and just be with it?
It feels incredible. As I say, there's nothing that adds up to that. It's like, hairs on the end moments where you get shivers, and there's no reason why you're getting shivers other than the fact that it's just this incredible feeling of almost euphoria when you're performing and it goes well. Because there's so many technicals involved as well, in the sense of I play guitar live, I sing live, I'm probably doing a set worth about 30 songs, sometimes many more, and it's when you get it right and you practice so hard just to get that moment right, and someone's acknowledged that means the world. But also I think the main thing about music, and the main thing that the world is definitely feeling at the moment because of live performances being awry, is it's a communication. It's a form of bringing us together. It's a universal language, and it's the only one that we all really tap into. And I think more than anything, post pandemic, we'll realise how critical that was in our lives.
Absolutely. And sort of what springs to mind when you say that is sort of the early periods of lockdown in sort of Italy and Spain, for example, where they were sort of outside the balcony and playing music, and it was really emotional to sort of watch that. I don't know if you saw some of those clips on YouTube. It was really, really emotional to see sort of people just sing to get through it all, and it just goes to show how powerful music is in terms of people connecting to it and the energy it brings as well. And I mean, for yourself, Jim, you've received some pretty big accolades, and people can do their own research and in that respect. But what's it feel like? You seem to be grounded. It still hasn't really got to. I mean, I know it's sometimes, I guess, in any profession, music, sport, it's easy sometimes to get some accolades, and it sort of gets to our head type thing. But for yourself, you seem to be quite grounded and focused on what you're doing, and not sort of too carried away by the accolades. What's it feel like to get the accolades, and knowing that people are recognizing you for your work?
It's incredible. I think at the end of the day, you're in a medium that is about accolades, and if you didn't get a clap after singing, it would be very strange.
Yeah.
But I think the main sort of thing that keeps me grounded is I'll still be doing it anyway. It's something that I do for my own personal enjoyment, not just for a crowd, not just for the accolades. I do it because it's a hobby, and it has always been in my life. So I think I've learned, and it takes time to learn that actually, as a young artist. Sometimes it can go to your head, and sometimes you do value your own worth from how many claps you get, or how many radio stations or performances you get. But I think you start to learn that, would I still be doing this if it wasn't for those crowds? Yes, yeah, of course you would. Like, you're a writer at heart, and you're a musician at heart, and I think that's what keeps you level-headed. Also, it's always good to have good people around you that love your music, but also just love you as a person, rather than the sort of surrounding yourself with people that only follow music. I think that would be my biggest advice to any young artist starting out, is just to have a really good solid group of people, like your family base, and people that are realistic, because it just makes you a better artist.
Absolutely. It's really fascinating you say that, and I've always sort of said, particularly in sports, for example, and I think the same applies to music too. You've got people who like the idea of doing it, the idea of maybe standing in front of the stage, but you got people who just love what they do, and they'd be doing it no matter what, irrespective of whether there's one person or 100,000 people watching. They just love what they do so much, and you sort of strike me as a sort of person who just you really love music, and I think that's a great thing for me to see artists who sort of really really love what they do and are passionate what they do. So there's plenty of artists up and down the country now, or around the world even, listening to the show and probably wondering in terms of, okay, there has been uncertainty. We've seen uncertainty around the world, where at different stages we've gone in and out of lockdown, changes in lockdown, and so on and so forth. Is it difficult to sort of write, sort of not knowing in terms of, okay, things could change next week? And I mean, I'm not suggesting to give any advice, but maybe a bit of a tip for any sort of artist who's sort of thinking, okay, with all the things that are going on in the world at the moment, the uncertainty, what are some things they can do to just really focus on writing, James? Anything you can sort of suggest that an artist can do?
I think this is a time that you've never had before, where you've got so much more time to yourself, and maybe that instrument that you wanted to learn, or that different style that you wanted to develop, or that new set list that you were planning on prepping but never really had the chance to change your set list, you can do now. There's a lot of open space for development, and I think it's about using that and not losing motivation, but actually progressing yourself. Use this time to harness your skills, rather than see it as, oh, I can't develop because I can't perform. See it as, oh my gosh, when I perform, I'm going to have so much new material and so many new skills, because I've, I don't know, got a ukulele for the first time, or wrote a song that is absolutely not what I normally try, because I had the time to develop and just try something new.
That's really interesting. And did you find that yourself in your own journey? You mentioned early on sort of obviously Ireland, and in terms of yourself, what's influenced you or your music, Jem? Is there any sort of influences on you over the years, and have they sort of changed the influence on your writing?
Yeah, there's so many different influences, from being a teenager. The drama that you go through at that age is very different to the drama that you go through in your 20s and so on. So I'm learning more and more about the different impacts that life circumstances have on me. I've mentioned a breakup before, and love obviously plays a massive part in writing, because love is something that we feel so deeply. Family experiences are huge influences. Just learning more about politics, learning more about different parts of the world. I've lived in London for 3 years, I was always in Manchester. And just opening myself up to so many new people and new conversations that inspire me to write about. I think you're constantly learning, and that's what the beauty about music is. You can take it as a journey. But also, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I have a heart condition. I have a few different things that have sort of hit me in terms of hurdles in my life. Nowhere near as most people, but there's definitely things that have influenced me in terms of my health and just keeping motivated, understanding things that have happened in my life and putting it down on a piece of paper. But I think the main thing that I've learned over the last couple of years in my 20s is that it's so good to write for other people. It's so good to actually take yourself out of that introspective and just look around you and think, oh my gosh, this is happening in this area I visited. I can't believe London is like that in that area. You learn from being very perceptive and listening, and I think that feeds very, very well into some of the best songs that have ever been written.
That's really interesting stuff. And in terms of yourself, I guess our listeners are probably wondering, music, and do you have like any musical preference that you listen to yourself, or just are you sort of open to listening to a number of different tunes, Jem? Are there times you find yourself just having your own downtime, and I was going to say put a CD on, an MP3 on, anything like that? Or?
There's so many. I've got such a diverse taste in music, and I think that's important as a musician to obviously not sort of tunnel yourself. But there's huge names that I always say, and they've kept on my playlist all since I was 17. Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, Katie Melua, she's incredible. Major country artists I really like, indie bands, the list is endless. Soul music is incredible. I wouldn't really say I listen to a certain type, but I definitely say there's some artists that have helped me progress through learning about the way they write, such as Ed Sheeran, Ben Howard, Taylor Swift, that sort of singer-songwriter that I would very much learn from.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And in terms of yourself, what's sort of your vision, going forward in terms of sort of in music, where I suppose you want your music to reach as many people as possible. Most musicians would want that, but do you have any sort of plans for your music? Is it more the same, writing and keep going? And
yeah, definitely. I think when the world kind of becomes a bit more normal, or the new normal, I would definitely release this album and make sure that I'm out performing as much as possible. I want to get bigger venues. You always want to aim higher. I want to develop more as a writer. I'd love to write with other people and start doing collaborations. I just think I'm constantly on a journey with it, and my plans are to take it as far and wide as I possibly can. I'd love to travel with my music.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'm sure that you'll be a name that listeners hear more of if they haven't already heard of you already. That's for sure. And in terms of your music itself, where can our listeners find your music, Jem? Where can they sort of look up and find your tunes?
So I'm across most music stores. So you've got iTunes and Spotify, obviously being the main sort of platforms that people use. So definitely check me out on Spotify and iTunes. You'll find my latest album, Love Potion, on there. And then I would say keep updated with YouTube, because I tend to put quite a lot of new material on there.
And so, do you have like the details of the YouTube channel, anything like that? Our listeners can.
Yeah, so it's Jem O'Reilly Music Tube.
And they can sort of log on there and sort of check out your tunes and get an idea of what you're doing as well too. Yeah. And that's great. Fascinating stuff. So, it's been really fascinating speaking to you, Jem. I'm sure the listeners have got a lot out of it, and really, really intrigued with what you do. I really want to thank you for coming on board the show. It's been really, really fascinating, and no, it's been great stuff. So that was Gemma O'Reilly, singer-songwriter. I do encourage you to sort of check out her tunes; they're fantastic, great stuff. And she's been really kind to join us on the show and give us an insight, a bit of a change from our normal theme, interviewing our sports people, our psychologists. But we try and diverse things on this show, and it's really important for me. I'm very passionate about music, and so is obviously the era that we live in. And one of the things I was sort of thinking about last night as I was driving, I wouldn't say it was a poignant moment, but I thought, okay, when we do have the so-called new norm, what's going to happen to all our live venues and all these things really that we've spent countless hours enjoying ourselves and so on and so forth. So hopefully when we do get back eventually to some sense of normality, our live venues get going again, and we can see great artists like Gemma O'Reilly's been kind enough to join us live again. So thank you, Gem, and we wish you all the best of your career.
Thank you, Gem. It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you.
So you're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM with your host Jimmy Petruzzi on the Friday Sports Show, bringing you all the latest news from around the world and the local area. And our next guest is a regular. He's been on the show before on a few occasions. He